Hi children, welcome to our next class. In last class you learned about the different parts of a plant, about roots, stem, leaves, these all you are completed, right? And in today's class, before going to read our new lesson, you tell me that in a plant, what are the colorful parts present in a plant? Which parts are very colorful and attractive in a plant? We'll call that plant by the name of that. Yes, you are right. Those are flowers. So in today's class, we are going to discuss about flowers. In getting to know about plants, today we are going to discuss about flowers. And before understanding the parts present in a flower and functions of the flower, you are going to do one activity. You just go for a nature walk or in your home near the flowering plant. You collect the fallen parts of a flower. Different fallen parts like this, the fallen parts of a flower you collect, and the different flowers you collect, and one sharp blade and a glass slide. These things arrange for doing your activity, children. And then each part of the flower, already I told you, the part which is green in color in a flower called as sepals, and the parts which are colorful and attractive are known as petals. So about each part, whenever we are discussing, you cut and open this petal parts, cut and open, separate each part of the flower and arrange on the glass slide. So this is the activity. Whatever the part we are discussing, that particular part you are going to dissect and you are going to learn more about each part, children. Now I will show you the PowerPoint, and about each part we are going to discuss in detail. After the activity, now we will move on to the floral parts, children. What are the different floral parts present in the flower? We'll see now. Just now I told you the green color parts which is present in a flower. These green color parts are known as sepals, and they'll protect the bud, they'll protect the flower when it is in the form of bud. When bud grows, it blooms into like flowers, right? So these are the sepals which are giving protection to the bud, are known as sepals. And then when these sepals bloom, the colorful petals comes out. So the colorful parts in the flower are known as petals. These petals helps to attract the insects for pollination purpose. What's the meaning of pollination? You are going to learn in this lesson. So these are the different colors of petals different plants have. Based on their petal name, based on their flower name, we'll call that plant along with the flower name. And in some flowers, instead of the colorful petals, sometimes they'll have the only white color petals. Then in such type of plants, the pollination takes place with the fragrance. The white color flowers will have more fragrance than the colored petals. So to attract the insects for the process of pollination, they are having fragrance. A sweet smell they'll have. So with that smell, they'll attract the insects to take pollination process. Now what's the pollination? Before understanding that, you need to understand what are the different parts present in a flower. In science subject especially, when you are learning anything, you will learn that subject along with the parts. What are the different parts present in them? When you are familiar with the different parts, Then it will be easy to understand you the type of function or how they are working. So here are the male parts of a flower, children. Whichever we are discussing, that part you dissect, separate and keep it on the glass slide so that it will be easy for you to understand the content, and then for drawing later, these all the parts draw in your classwork and label it very neatly. So this is the male part of a flower. The male part of the flower called as stamen. So what are the different parts present in a stamen? We'll see. A stamen has a long tube-like structure called as filament. So this is the filament. One end of the filament have a head-like structure. This is called anther. The head-like part is known as anther and the tube-like part is filament. So inside the anther, when you cut and open and see, you can observe the pollen sacs inside the anther. Inside this pollen sac, small yellow color pollen grains are present. So these are the male gametes in flowers. So these male gametes are having a nucleus inside, that is male nucleus. Understood, children? So these filament, anther, pollen grains together called as stamen, and this is the male part of a flower. And now if we see the female part of a flower, when you are dissecting the female part from the flower, you already, if the petals are, when we discussed about petals, some flowers petals are attached to each other. Some flowers petals will have some gap between them. So if the flower which you are dissecting, if their petals are attached to each other, you just separate them, cut them and then open it. So these yellow colored parts are male parts, stamen, and the middle part which has a very long tube, that is female part of the flower. To observe clearly, you better to choose China rose or Datura flowers. When you take, you can clearly observe the male parts and the female parts of a flower. Stamen and pistil. The female part of the flower is known as the carpel or the pistil. So the female part of the flower is called as carpel or the pistil. And don't choose chrysanthemum flower or sunflower. Don't take for your dissection or for the doing activity, because there is a separate arrangement. The colorful parts all are not the petals in these flowers. About this, you will learn in higher classes. Each petal will act like a flower there. So, for your dissection purpose, better use either hibiscus flower or datura flower, which have both male and female parts in same flower. So here you clearly understood about the stamen, which is male part of the flower. Now we are reading about the female part of the flower, that is carpel or the pistil. So this long tube-like structure which is present known as style. Style. The one end of the style have a gummy-like structure which is known as stigma. A gummy part which is present at the end of the style called as stigma. One end of the style has stigma, the other end of the style has ovary, a swollen part present at the other end of the style called as ovary. So inside the ovary, ovules are present. When you cut with a sharp blade, take your elder's help while dissecting the flower, make a cut and then open, Try to see the ovules present inside the ovary. And then, now you can understand what's the meaning of pollination. So, transfer of pollen grains. Now we'll see the female parts of the flower once again, children. The female part of a flower is called as pistil or the carpel. And so here it starts with stigma and has a long tube called style. The other end of the style has ovary. Inside the ovary, ovules are present. So this arrangement is known as female part of a flower. It's also called as carpel or the pistil. Now, what changes occurs and what's the meaning of pollination we'll see. Pollination means transfer of pollen grains. You know what's the meaning of pollen grain? The male part of the flower is known as pollen grains. So these pollen grains will go and fall on the stigma. So the transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma is known as pollination. So in this pollination process, the insects are helping. Insects will visit different parts of the different flowers they'll visit to suck the nectar. Nectar is nothing but a sweet juice present in flowers. So for the purpose of nectar, when they visit, they'll sit on the petals, and when they are sucking the nectar, these pollen grains will touch to their legs pads. So when they sit on the stigma, these pollen grains will fall on the stigma. So it's helping, the insect is helping for pollination process. Pollination is nothing but transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma is known as pollination. So after falling on the stigma, then we'll see what happens in the stigma. So here after falling, out of many pollen grains, one pollen grain which is very healthy will grow a long tube-like structure up to the ovary. This long tube-like structure which is growing from the pollen grain is known as pollen tube. So this pollen tube has two male nuclei. So pollen tube is carrying two male nuclei into the ovary. So one male nuclei fuses with one female nucleus. That is only known as fertilization. Fusion means nothing but mixing of male nucleus and the female nucleus is known as fertilization. So two male nuclei are coming into the ovary, I told you. So one male nuclei is fusing with female nuclei. Then the other male nuclei fuses with polar nuclei. So two polar nuclei are present. So one male nucleus fusing with two polar nuclei is known as triple fusion. So fertilization is taking place twice. Once fusing with the female nucleus, one time fusing with polar nuclei. That's why it's also called as double fertilization. Double fertilization, triple fusion is taking place in plants. So understood, children? This is all about pollination and fertilization process which takes place in plants. Now, your today's homework is you collect any 5 types of different plant flowers and observe how is their sepal arrangement, how many sepals they have, and whether they are united or they separate from each other. try to find out this and make a tabular column in your notebook. And also observe their petals. How many petals your flower has and whether these petals are united or separated from each other. These observations make a note in your notebook, children. At the same time, you dissected your flower and found the male and female parts of the flower. So draw the male parts of the flower and label the parts. And draw the female parts of the flower and label the parts. This is your today's homework, children. In coming class, we'll discuss the textual exercises of